the last resort. Of course the people at Moon Galena 9 were ostensibly and officially deceased, but the orchids would probably by all accounts still be alive, DNA salvageable at least. Supposedly there was an environmental monitoring system employed in his antecedent's apartment, and this orchid was even then beyond priceless. Although the universal power grid was suspended, the high-status apartment systems in the pseudo-favelas were still active on a stasis mode private solar power net, so it would be a small matter to slip in past moon surveillance and retrieve the flora. As the pay was to supposedly be stupendous, guess it was one of the worst holiday moon gone wrong scenarios on record, under maximum quarantine for 317 years, and a total histomedia infoblock, before we even began. And not that they cared, but they had subsidized our shuttle to be equipped with 3 levels of microbial and psi fumigation, and actually, us too. I knew they'd bump us off given half a chance, having got their organic data back, accidentally lose us in just another port or airlock tragedy. But I let it be known I had something on Kraus, who knew that I knew, and he knew what I knew was also known to my brief, and sequestered in 3 other locations with 3 unnamed individuals should we not return in fine fettle and full form and functionality. He was a pragmatic man. He had a knack of not taking the right things seriously and failed to notice the fury behind Kraus' curt smile and handshake, and so he wished us break a leg. So knew we were in the necessary level of mutual understanding, M's the word, a bit like the Dutch julep insanity, a bulb the price of a house. But an orchid of some sort, a zygomorph exposed to some form of telegenetic mutation, the most valuable flower in the sector. They said it sensed things, and communicated in color. Bit of a fuss. I knew there was much more to it than that, something so crazy that bored quadrillionaire demagogues and moguls craving to soothe their infinite fatigue with mere mortal existence wanted the intelligence. So, a real fancy shuttle was hired. Exasperated Germanic pilot come Indonesian chef, more of said later, crew of 5, onboard engineer, 2 charming stewards, yes 2 solid state holostards, Howard and Grange, just to psychodaptively morph so as to be attentive to our every comfort and pleasure. Now I never ever want to go home, and 3-gauge protection wear, weaponry, in case of a chase, and a few of the more personable, nicer black market luxuries from old Blighty laid on, gratis, nuff said. So, eventually getting to the now dark deserted Moon Resort after a not unpleasant 12-day jaunt, we ventured wearily to the corroded business ports, and after several frustrating hours I realized they had been software welded shut, all linked to the main access welcome port, seeing only darkened silhouettes from the outside of the several vast interconnected air domes locked to all senses. And whilst a Vididrone did aerial reconnaissance over the domes, I sets to work trying to unlock the triple secured entrances and buzzed the main unlock code, bypassed, tried several others, all the overrides. She tapped him on the shoulder. Switch off the comms to ship, she mouthed silently. He nodded. Hours passed in frustration, then at last resort, fuck it. The main power key reset, sensed vibrations from far within. Blurred alphanumerics and intercom signs flash to be seen from space are projected on the interior of the domes. Gotcha. Discrete lighting formats fade into view in the depths of the scene. As the complex groans into activity, arcs of light flood over the resort, the airlock grinds open and a cacophony of jumbled prehistoric party music, jingles, advertisements and welcome messages flood our comm channels as we cautiously enter the lock, jamming the gate with a precautionary wrench so as to not completely close behind us. And as the final interior airlock opens, a half-dozen holobots and welcome droids activate and aim their consciousnesses at pleasing the new guests. Him, though he fancied himself sapiosexual, was never happier than with uncomplicated pleasure-set artificial intelligences, but she was less than amused. Word was she had once killed 11 estate brokers in 2 minutes at the travel office, and 2 with her bare hands. In a fit of pique, I saw the CCTV, but she got off with the charge, as it happened to be a foreign terror cell. The luck o' the Irish, huh? She pushed her way past them to find the main gate release at the check-in bay. What month? Even AI drones deserve some little courtesy. I followed her, observing the gaps in the facade of the entrance foyer, the vast echoing service corridors piled with neatly stacked products and organics in an emergent cloud of vapor as the hiss of temperature control systems fades in, clearly organized by other maintenance drones without appropriate protocols before the system was remotely shut down from orbit. There had been whisperings of quietly reopening and rebranding the moon as some kind of macabre entertainment destination for the highbrow occultists and death squad freaks to do their voodoo ceremonies, commune with the dead, shit like that. These cranks will pay mega premium dollar to get their twisted jollies, and the corpses would only add to the spooky ambience. Purple and green floodlights, and candles just like Halloween. Coat 'em in clear resin, bandage 'em up and sell 'em off as historical ornaments to be ritually invaded, hollowed out and snorted by the Crowley crew. You know what I mean. There had been articles in various periodicals about its prophetic time and place in a conjunction of universal signposts, stellar alignments and orbits of Mercury and such like nonsense, for there had been some unusual activities reported even weeks before the resort was officially closed to the traffic, comms, and all outside investigations. But now, dear reader, is not the time to tell you about all those other shenanigans. So, just outside the main dome we found our first corpse close up. I had thought it was just a drone that had keeled over, but it actually was the remains of an organic humanoid, who had oddly expired, smiling, lying on its back with two arms pointed up in a position of acceptance like a love doll. The resort had been in a near 0-degree near vacuum for over 300 years, hence the perfect preservation. There was a rush of air as she slid open the gates to the main dome to reveal the once beautiful beach set, a late afternoon ambience in a dense fog caused by the sudden change of temperature and air pressure. A few snowflakes dare to encroach the silent reverie of the shore, caressed with frozen waves, historically quite inaccurate but a triumph of illusionism nonetheless. An almost perfect simulation of old Rio in miniature. Invisible apartment blocks, morphing hotels and bars surrounded by an authentic maze of realistic favelas blending into projections of the distance. Figures slowly emerge from the clearing mist, like statues, sunbathing or standing on the beach of this imaginary perfect idyll, or so it seemed to my eyes. She had bounded on ahead in the low gravity, a major selling point in the pleasure set's sensor spin. I stepped more gingerly into the sands, with a sense of foreboding, thinking these shopping bags are collector's items, to tiptoe through the sands, my boots transmitting sensory data to my feet, and as a logic alert sounded in my earpiece, I could feel it crunch oddly underfoot, as if semi-fluidized. Across the water, submerged to his knees, a youth pointing vaguely to somewhere on the artificial horizon peppered with images of quaint fishing boats and morphing morphine clouds, caught in a gust of the warm simulated breeze, leaned over to his left and toppled onto the ice, smashing to pieces. Did you see that? What? One of them just moved. The ice melts, they're all fucking desiccated, frozen dust. Turn that wind off, I shouted into the comm. And you turn off the ocean sounds and the seagulls too, huh? Dunno. Eerily he had caught the dead dry eye of some glistening Adonis and felt a cold shudder of dreamlike discomfiture crunching past these perfectly posed perfect people. Some of the figures were kneeling, many just looking up in the same direction. Some incongruously naked figures had organized their bodies into strange and obscene permutations. Half children love gods, half spatial ruses, like fragments of a disorganized geometrical puzzle or bits of sentences in an alien language dotted about the beach in strange configurations of symmetry and asymmetry, frozen in some fragment of the ideal where time had stopped in progressive waves. He touched that buff shoulder, and pulled back in revulsion as his finger sank into grumbling nothingness. With the strange sensation of being watched by dead eyes, he pulled out his microscan recorder, and sank down to observe the texture of the sand more closely, took a 3D scan, and waited as slowly it resolved, zooming out from subatomic ratio to macro to reveal each grain had been almost mathematically arranged, as if by miniature Mayans, into tiny geometric spatial structures. This was insane. As he stared, a giant black something suddenly moved fast in amongst the patterns. Fucking hell, what? Dunno, Something moved in the sand. Fuck. There's ants or termites here, there must be billions of them. Alive. At that temperature? Curiouser and curiouser, she said over the comm from the other end of the beach. Hey, look at Mount Corcovado. Which one is that? The one with the statue, you dingus, she snapped. He looked up to see what looked like a red metallic manky neko just beginning to emerge from the fog, rocking its feline arm, as it slowly began to mechanically transform into something else. I reckon it's a holomatrix with mechanics to support it? Yeah. They didn't have solid light back then, probably stuck in a glitch. Projections of ancient Hindu figures flickered with a melancholy-looking robed man with arms outstretched in the shape of a cross. Christ the Redeemer in transition to something else. An astronaut, says here they would evolve it hourly for the different party groups as they had their peak hours. Hang on a second, see if I can activate Carnivale. Says here in the records it was a hologram and robot sex droid performance, inviting the guests to join in, on permanent 24-hour-a-day loop. A suspension of disbelief. The Great Historical Art Con. What a snob, I thought to myself. I saw her wave me over from the far end of the beach, and we both headed towards the main thoroughfare, and sure enough, there it was. Frozen holographic ticker tape and streamers and floats and dancers and corpses standing and reclining. I pushed one of the smiling engaged figures gently and he fell to the ground, smashing into others, half-frozen particles like dominoes. Here we go, she said. 3, 2, 1. She pressed an icon on her compad. The carnival loop activated, spookily flickering in wild simulated action. Put your visor to infra so you can see which are the droids. In infra the humanoids appeared as light-shaded statues dotted in amongst light structures, and in the far distance a light figure ran from in between two buildings. He dismissed it as a hallucination and shifted back to photon view. A strange location for the thing they want, she said, glancing to the top of the statue. He checked the map. Weird, I thought it was in the apartment blocks. Have they changed the references? Do leapies eat. Come on then, let's get over there and out of here. Following a DNA positioning beacon they made their way through the thronging joyous crowds and frozen figures towards the miniature mountain. Stop the fucking holograms, will you? He screamed through the noise. She fumbled on her pad and the confetti froze. There was a hiss of aircon as they hopped one of the little cable cars to take them halfway to the summit, floating over crowds of frozen figures all walking towards or looking at the top of the mountain. There seemed to be figures there silhouetted in the dusk, standing on the top of its head, with a flag of all things. There was a real big hush-hush about this place. Rumors abounded. They said there was a nuclear accident, or an alien virus attack, and everyone was vaporized. News footage was faked. No bodies to mourn over, no grief porn, no nothing. Just big payouts for media silence. The insurance companies were bailed out by a 3-planet conglomerate, taxing robot zombies to high heaven before they were born and after they died, and a dark world government financiers bailout to pay off the thousands of claims. One planetary economy went under, filed for bankruptcy. It wasn't just a recession, or a depression, but a total fucking breakdown. Still feeling the impact 300 years later. Changed history. One stupid holiday moon disaster, and they send us to retrieve some plants. WTF? Where are the main vaults? Bet there's some decent fodder in there, she mumbled other thoughts to her infopad as we drew closer to the top of the mount. The statue now resembled an obelisk covered in shifting images and runes, morphing to a golden statue of a humanoid baby. I think the projection media files might be corrupted, as the visages flickered disturbingly from that of a baby, then to a Statue of Liberty, then to the 5-faced schismatic godhead of the moons of Betelgeuse, then to a red metallic smiling cat again. Glitch City. Increasingly spooked by strange noises in the distance, they made their way to the stairs that ran up the inside of the mechanics of the statue, stumbling past kneeling figures clogging the staircase. A strange howling wind had arose as they reached the shoulder and climbed up the folds of the cat's arm, shot a harpoon over and swung up to the top of the head, to find the 5 frozen half-dressed tourists in the configuration of the photograph at Iwo Jima. Over there, she sang, looking at him askance. What the? He looked at the studious faces of the figures. The shaft of the flagpole had actually penetrated the resin cranium of the statue, having been planted with such force. "Yes, this is it. This is the object," he said, leaning further towards the figure of the squatting man. There was some odd reflection which drew him to notice a plant-like spike protruding from the back of the man's head. "I think we have it, funny kind of orchid. The Ophiocordyceps of the people," she snickered. "What do you mean?" He reached out a sterile contliner and his tweezers to ease out the organism which seemed to have grown out of the base of the man's cranium, still clearly ejaculating spores into the breeze. As he did so, he momentarily glanced into the man's ear and saw light. As he looked closer, he observed a microscope of geometry. Pulled out his torch and shone it in the other ear. It was as if the material of the man's brain had been microscopically carved in its desiccated state to represent shifting interrelated geometric patterns and forms. As he moved his helmet closer, these microscopic patterns zoomed vastly, wildly amplifying every movement of his head, a spatial illusion of optics on the inside of a cranium. "Have you seen this?" he said. She was already looking into the ear of one of the other figures. Trillions of overlaid microscopic geometrical figures, like those in the beach sands, but vastly more complex. "We should take the whole head," she said. "Never mind the orchids, we can sell the skulls." "You're right. Laser scalpel? I can show more to you than you have ever dreamed," said the figure suddenly in a strange disembodied voice without moving its lips or looking at him. An ant scurried from under his upper lip into his right nostril. "For you alone I will unfold the logic of the universe." "What the?" he said, stepping back in incredulity and tripping off the edge of the head. He awoke to the creaking of the guy rope and her voice in the comm. His head passing through the projected surface image of a giant eye to see the machinery behind it, and back again as he rocked suspended like a broken yo. "What happened? The fucking thing just spoke to me, but they're dead. They got no fucking brains." I know. Winching himself slowly back up to the top of the now benignly smiling blue-faced skull, he wasn't sure if the lips really had moved. Had he imagined the voice? "It's the fucking plant talking." With a flash of laser scalpels, two heads fell into plastic carry bags, and somehow they could sense that some kind of consciousness now knew something new. The synthetic ocean was melting, and there was the odd slight movement amongst the throng below as they suddenly decided to make their way back to the airlock with more than considerable haste. "Gettin' spooky round here, man. Let's fucking scram, pronto." A carefully aimed harpoon rocket shot, a 2-kilometer-long wire, the old Simon Groom routine. Oh, they couldn't help but scream like little girls, lips fluttering in the roar of conditioned perfumed air. "Fly me to the moon over Carnivale Beach like bullets." Shoplifters with full shopping bags, prepare for impact. NB Ophiocordyceps, necromancers, intruder droids. When they get back to the ship, the two holograms turn to face them, smiling, hunched over the bodies of the crew covered in blood. "We don't know what happened. We tried to help them." He shuddered, remembering the cool, decisive hands of the massages. They managed to switch the main power off on the ship and disconnect the holograms who were clearly meant to kill them all. "You know what this means," she said. He nodded.